you right now, you're newly in Ukraine. Tell me a little bit about what you've gone to Ukraine for, what you're hoping to investigate. I'm sure it's going to inform your podcast and probably your work with the Root as well.
Yes. Yeah, so there are a couple things. One, I'm technically on a book leave. I'm here technically writing a book, and it's my memoir about traveling to living in Ukraine, Georgia, the country of Georgia, and Russia as a Black man, and how growing up in a Black city like Detroit and then coming over here, how both those experiences merged together and informed the way that I look at even U.S. Politics and domestic policy. My upbringing growing up in Detroit and coming over here as a Black man informs how I view the way that U.S. politics functions, right? So that's the primary thing. But in regards to the other stories I'm working on, I'm here basically to part of being an expert in this part of the world requires you to actually be here, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times I come here just to see what's going on. So this particular trip, I focus on tourism development. I focus on how the country is responding to COVID-19, because ultimately it's not just about the politics and the parliament and everything. It's really about, if someone calls me on to talk about Burisma, or call me on to talk about Joe Biden's dealings here in Ukraine, part of it is just being able to tell you, I've traveled to this town, I've traveled to that town, I've been hanging out with these amount of friends, I've been hanging out with these amount of friends, and nobody talks about Burisma. And that's actually the truth. Like, no one does it. And so this is just something that Trump and the Republicans are concocting because no one talks about it. Mm-hmm. Okay? You have to be in these kind of fancy circles in order to get it. I mean, like, going about your day, you're not going to go to some tea, some cafe, and over here people, oh, Joe Biden, the election. No one cares, okay? Mm-hmm. But because I'm here, I could kind of like tell you that. But on another level, it's really about when I go here, and also, eventually Russia, which is the next destination I have to go to. Part of this is, I think that the American public, we've spent 2016, for example, talking about Russia. But if you tell them you can't talk about the Kremlin, you can't say Putin, you can't say Siberia, you can't say cold, you just give them a number of things and say, okay, you can't mention any of these things. What do you know about Russia? Come to find out, people can't tell you jack about Russia. All right. So it's a lesson for us, right? And about what people prioritize and what people ought to know. And so me being here is about being in touch with the people, because my job as a podcaster is to connect people to people. And so over the next few weeks, you will be hearing me talk directly to the people about what they're thinking, what their thoughts are about their country, about their future. And I think that'll help us as journalists, but also the work that I'll do, I hope, will instruct the general population on how to engage local people here. And often it's not through the types of things that we are hearing about through the major networks in DC and New York.
Yeah. No, so much of what you just said is really fascinating, because I like to think that I have at least a somewhat broad horizon. I try to cover international news. It's been a little bit more rare during the pandemic. I've been very focused on that. It's a failing of mine. But when you said that you were in Ukraine, instantly, first thing in my mind is, yeah, that was a pretty big story. Biden and Trump and Ukraine and what they were going to do. And you said no one's there talking about it. Funnily enough, nobody's really talking about it here either, despite the fact that it seemed like it was going to be this big thing.
Well, here's the thing, right? Like, it's proven here that we could talk about Hunter Biden. Like, we could talk about the idea that, was it a good look for him to be on this board making X amount of dollars while his dad was vice president? We can have a conversation about how families of elected officials, like a vice president, should be engaged in these type of dealings. That's a separate conversation. They're saying that Joe Biden was engaged in a corrupt behavior, right? That's completely different. It's also false. Okay, we can say whatever we want about Joe Biden, but Joe Biden did not engage in any type of nefarious dealings while he was here. It just didn't happen. And another thing is that being here and studying this region and understanding the players, the people that Rudy Giuliani is pulling out are at the bottom of the barrel. No one here respects them. Okay, but here's the thing: as somebody who doesn't understand Ukrainian politics, the app, which is most American viewers, they don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
you
that's
know,
the thing.
it's funny you say that, though. I don't know much about Ukrainian politics, but when
Most
Rudy
people
Giuliani
don't.
raised these people up, I suspected nobody respected them. I wasn't sure, but I
But,
suspected.
but most people don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
but see, the thing is, because you are trained to funnel out bull,
Mm-hmm.
you are able to deduce that without knowing anything about it because you're trained and what you're trained to ask questions and be curious. But
Yeah.
most Americans, most people are not trained in media literacy.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more question, just because I'm now curious about Ukraine. You mentioned there that that's one of the things that people are worried about is coronavirus. Tell me about the experience there. How is it affecting people's lives? Has it become politicized the way that it has in America? Do they have faith in their government to deal with it? And I know, when Trump talks about Europe, how it looks like they have less cases, that's just because they do less testing. Is that the impression that you get? What's the reality on the ground in Ukraine for the fight against the coronavirus?
Well, the reality in Ukraine is that they're dealing with far fewer resources than the United States, and here the country is still very much a challenge. When I came to Ukraine, I had to have travel insurance that if something happens to me, if something requires an emergency evacuation, I needed a document or proof of insurance that would ensure that I would be able to get myself out of the country so I would not burden or tax the healthcare infrastructure of this country. So I had to have that. Right now, Ukraine is not part of the European Union. So while most countries in the European Union have banned Americans from coming, Ukraine welcomes Americans. We just have to go under this quarantine for 14 days. So I have an app on my phone where I have to take a photo of myself each day, and the app scans the metadata so it can pinpoint where I am. And yeah, so now it's surveillance. Okay, let's just call it it's surveillance, right? And so
Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah, it's surveillance, and so that's their way of keeping track of foreigners that are coming in. And so, why is Ukraine doing that? I'm actually going to be doing some reporting on this in the next few weeks. But what you surmise is that Ukraine, it can't afford to drastically cut off its tourism industry, right? So that's what you're suffering with. And a doctor here, they're making $500, $600 a month. If that, nurses are making $300, $400 or roughly lower. So you're dealing with a system that's not only taxed, but people are underpaid. And so it's a lot more stressed than America. But in regards to the faith in government, the current president, Zelensky, is in a pretty precarious situation. He came in this idea of I'm going to reform the country, and he came in under this idea. He beat a former president Petro Poroshenko, right? And a lot of it was that it was because of the failure to end the war that's going on in the eastern part of the country, that's in Donetsk and Luhansk, and the annexation of Crimea. And so so Zelensky, who was a professional comedian, entertainer, came in and spoke a better game. Now, obviously, governance is a lot different and a lot more challenging than campaigning, and so he's having a rough go of it. And he's had a lot of mixed reviews, and people's faith in him has declined over the past months. And so Zelensky is dealing with the war. He's dealing with the war in eastern Ukraine. He's dealing with the annexation of a country where basically a third of the country is in Russian control, and he's dealing with a pandemic. So when we say he's having a rough go of it, that's a severe understatement. And so there are a lot of people who feel as though he is not making strong enough decisions to fight corruption. A lot of the reformers that were in the, that were part of the administration are no longer part of the administration because they've been sacked. So if you're asking for my analysis, he's not doing well. Okay, he's not doing well, and this pandemic is only making it worse.
Okay. Well, look, it's obviously a very different country from the U.S., but a lot of the troubles sound pretty similar to what we're experiencing right now. So, yeah, and it sounds like there is a ton for you to dig into in Ukraine, but also when you get to Russia, I would be fascinated to learn a little bit more about what's going on the ground. So we should definitely touch base further into your travels. Where can people see more of your work as your travels continue?
Oh, thank you very much. So go to my Instagram. My Instagram is my government name, Terrell J. Starr on Instagram, at Terrell, Terrell, J. Starr. Now, I have a Twitter account, Russia_Starr. I'm actually, because I'm on my book leave, I'm avoiding it. But so you can come to my Instagram. And also, finally, Black Diplomats. Go to blackdiplomats.net. where you find the website, but also go to any podcast app and you can download Black Diplomats. We drop an episode every single week. This week, just giving you a preview. I normally don't tell people who I'm going to be interviewing next, but this Saturday, we're dropping an interview with Beatrice Finn, who is the 2017 Nobel Prize winner for her efforts to abolish nuclear weapons.
Wow. No, that sounds awesome. Terrell, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and best of luck in your work in Ukraine and beyond.
Hey, thank you. Anytime.
Thank you.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.